Okay, let us re-engage. We are now entering the work session for the Pinehurst Village Council of July 23rd, 2024. We will be discussing two items of general business. The first one will be a review of the Pinehurst Social District and options for future implementation. Doug, go right ahead.
Thanks. So as you've probably heard, that we got a lot of good feedback about the social district during the U.S. Open. And so I've been approached by a few businesses that have asked, is this an option for doing in the future sometime? So I'm bringing it to council to see if you have an appetite for that. I suggested 3 different options that we could, one, make it permanent. This is one that I would not recommend, although it would probably be the easiest to administer because we only have to do everything once, and then it's everyone understands when it's a social district, and well, that it would always be one, so there's no confusion on that. Alternatively, we could do like weekends and holidays and special events, and then for the third option, I had only special events. So my thought process was that we could try special events through the fall, and then reassess at the beginning of the calendar year, see how it was going, and then if at that point, you know, we haven't had any issues, maybe we do add weekends and holidays onto it as well. But again, this is an open discussion. I'm very much open to what council wants to do and see if there's another option available.
Yeah, I'll voice my thoughts here. I think that I'd like to start with the special events only, and then we can always grow it. I would add the Sandhills Motoring Exchange weekend to the special event. It's usually in when near Memorial Day. It's Memorial Day weekend.
Yeah, I only put the ones for the rest of the calendar year.
Okay,
but
fine.
Yeah.
I got you. And I think that the issue of the timing, I'd be curious what other people think, whether you go from, I guess it's 11 to 10 or 11 to 11. I understand the the concept of moving it up to 11 in the morning so people can go through lunchtime. How late we go in the evening, I'm okay with either, but I'll defer to my colleagues again. Dr. Morgan, I see a green light from you there. You want to? No, I'm sorry.
I guess my poker signs are showing.
Yeah.
Independence Day. I know it's past now, but that seems like a special event to me.
Yeah, so again, I only did the ones through the fall, through the rest of the calendar year, but I agree. Independence Day, the Motoring Festival, I would have to look up what is normally what
Valentine's Day, Mother's Day. I'm just
No,
joking.
it depends on your mom, I guess.
Arbor Day.
Okay. I have no problem with special events only, including your big weekend stuff that have passed on there. I have no problem in revisiting this. Seem to remember a little over a year ago we talked about we're going to revisit the First Friday. I don't remember revisiting that though, so I want to make sure we actually revisit.
Yeah, the Live After 5, you mean?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Live After 5. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's no longer held in downtown. That's at the
I know we were supposed to revisit that because
Oh, I
we
see.
agreed to it for 1 year to move it to the Arboretum.
Yeah, we did get some feedback at our last business listening session that they would like that revisited.
Yeah, my point is, we say this in the meeting and say we're going to revisit it, but it doesn't always pop up on the calendar. That's an example of it.
Yeah.
Well, let's add it to a future calendar.
Yeah. So near the end of December, we'll put this in, and then you know, the next meeting or two, we can bring up the.
I would
Live
like
After
to go
5.
on record as I don't think this is a good idea. I don't see where the social district adds to the ambiance or character of the community in any way, shape, or form. I can understand completely the U.S. Open issue. It's a every 5-year event, special significant event with lots of people. But these other events, I mean, U.S. Kids, the Holly Arts Festival, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, I don't see where being able to carry a drink around the downtown adds to the character of the community in any way, shape, or form. That's my opinion. So I would be against this expanding the social district.
Well, I have some concerns about it. Primarily, do we know how the residents feel about it?
So we did not hear any feedback, actually, one way or the other, after the U.S. Open from any residents in the area. I have heard back from multiple businesses, both actual restaurants and licensees, but also some of the retail shops that, were pleased with it. But yeah, no, not any residents. That is something we could potentially do. We could bring it up at the NAC meeting for that neighborhood, or ask that contact if there was any concerns before we make any decision.
So the other question I had is on the holidays. How many of the merchants and the restaurants are actually open?
Well, the restaurants probably are, but each merchant's different, so yeah, it's up to them. But.
John, you have thoughts?
Before going to an opinion, what are the practical or budgetary ramifications of additional policing? Admitting that it shouldn't be as large as it was during the U.S. Open, but if it works, it won't be zero either.
Yeah, I mean, really, it would be an officer that was in the area that would notice something. I don't think there would be any actual financial impact. We wouldn't be hiring anyone to police this. It would just be an officer on duty would be responsible for just checking it out and seeing if there are any issues.
My informal survey of business owners was that none were opposed, some were for. Their suggestion was Fridays and Saturdays, and they were fine with stopping at 10 o'clock because for the non-restaurants, they didn't want to stay open that late anyway. Right. They might stay open till 8 or 9 instead of 5 or 6. Jack, I hear your comment on ambiance. I have to think about that. I'm not prepared to, by any means, to dismiss that out of hand, and I hadn't thought about it. I guess you'd kind of color me modestly in favor, but subject to some further cogitation.
And this isn't something we necessarily need a decision on tonight.
I was going to ask a related question. Is this triggered by the upcoming U.S. Kids event? Or
yeah, we had a request that, if possible, if we could get it in place for that. And so there's an ordinance that would allow that you can act on tonight. But if council is uncomfortable with that or wants to weigh it in a little more on that, we can wait.
I would have no problem approving it just for U.S. kids as we ponder the longer-term ramifications of doing more of it.
Are the U.S. kids going to be walking around with?
I must say that's going to be a great headline.
Yeah.
Parents after a long day on the golf course might.
Yeah, it is a huge event where there's lots and lots of folks coming into town, and the kids certainly don't come in by themselves. I hear what you're saying. I do not agree with just approving it for U.S. kids, because I can see the headline on that one saying Pinehurst approves social district for U.S. kids. Matt's listening and laughing. Okay.
Matt would never write that.
Yeah, he'd never do that to us. Ultimately, if we're going to approve it for special events, let's say it's for special events and say, okay, let's give it a try. I'm one of those people that thinks the vast majority of people are responsible, okay, especially the visitors we have coming here. We do have a few folks that come in and, make buffoons of themselves, but it seemed to work out fine with the open, and I think trying it is certainly appropriate. But to approve just U.S. kids, no. To approve and saying the rest of the year, let's try it, I got no problem with that. And then see how responsible people are.
Well, I'm trying to get the pulse here. I agree with the idea that we have to do it for special events and not carve out U.S. kids. That's, I don't think that's the way to go. I tend to lean towards these special events for the social district, but I hear what Jack says, and it's a factor. Other thoughts?
I don't know if this makes a difference, but you could also just do it through October, and then reassess after that. That gives us 3 events.
I think that's a
Four
good
events.
idea. There's something about Thanksgiving and Christmas that doesn't fit with the rest of it. They're not,
I think it's going to be a self-limiting factor anyway. I think those are useless dates to put it on there. But say, okay, fine, if you want to do that. I just do not see, certainly specifically Thanksgiving and Christmas. New Year's I can see,
agreed.
okay? But Thanksgiving and Christmas, I don't think anybody's going to be out there doing that, so.
Well, okay, we're getting there. So we will go forward for U.S. Kids through Oktoberfest?
I'm sorry, US Kids through Oktoberfest? I'd be fine with that. I think it's a logical extension of Barbecue Fest, a somewhat logical extension of Holly Arts, although my question there would be, they take up a lot of space in the roadway for their, I don't exactly know how those logistics would work.
I always thought Holly Arts Festival ends earlier in the day, though, doesn't it?
It does.
Maybe they'll be gone. Maybe it's academic.
Yeah.
Yeah, but during that event, like, the streets are all closed. You could carry a beer around as you went to the different shops. That would be the idea of that one.
All right. All right. Do we want to go forward with U.S. Kids through Oktoberfest as a try? Yes, we do. I see John nodding his head.
Yes.
Dr. Morgan? Okay. I'll be with that.
So I move to approve an ordinance 24-15 with amendments creating a social district to regulate open containers of alcoholic beverages, amending section 130-05 to the Pinehurst Municipal Code, with the amendment being, we will put on a trial basis for U.S. Kids of this year, Barbecue Fest / Labor Day of this year, and Holly Arts Festival of this year, and Oktoberfest of this year.
We have a motion.
Second.
We have a second. Any other debate? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Motion passes 4-1. Thank you. Okay. All right, the next item, the discussion of code enforcement. So this is, we've talked about this in the past, and we had asked, I think, John Taylor and Barb, who have been raising this from time to time in the council meetings, to come up with a discussion outline, and I know they've met with staff and had some good input and discussion about that, and so I'm going to ask John or Barb, whichever one would first like to talk about it, and then we can go from there.
So as Barb and I talked about how to go about this, with the intention of this, what we're going to do now not becoming either an unfocused or an interminable debate, we thought the first thing to do was probably to sit down with staff and get some direction from them, so that A, we didn't either waste a lot of time doing things that might be precluded by a general statute or something like that, and also to get their input as being certainly much more familiar with the nitty-gritty of specific ordinances than I would claim to be. And again, our hope is what will come out of this. So we sat down, I think we had, every member of senior staff was there, save, I think Angie wasn't from I'm sorry?
Dana was not there.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dan, right.
Elements of senior staff that are involved in code enforcement.
Right, that's a good way to put it. And what we hope will come out of here, because this was sort of the request of staff, is give us some clear direction for what you want. It's not, I think, our function to be actually crafting the language if we felt there would be need a new ordinance or even a revision to ordinance. And with specific reference to STRs, I mean, we deliberately did not attempt to do a deep dive there, because of the time constraints we had with all of the staff there, and B, because there are, that can be a complicated topic for us to discuss in open session. So it is neither my right nor my desire to curtail discussion of anything, but I might ask if, in the case of STRs, if I could just propose what we came up with as the output for that, and we table subsequent discussion, of which there can be a lot, for another time. I will say that the recommendations there were, number one, to ask staff to provide a recommendation on what they feel would be the best software packages. We've budgeted a specific amount for this current fiscal year, and they've already have some background in looking at this, and just to come back to us with a recommendation that it's package X for whatever reason. I'm not sure there is a perfect package there, obviously, but the identification of particularly new STRs or those people who might have listed their house for rent during the US Open and try to then extend it, just identifying where they are is an important part of any enforcement action. The second thing, and this was a very interesting thing that came up. When we have reason to believe, and Alex, if I misstate this, please correct me. When we have reason to believe that there is a violation, either a violation of some other municipal code that is occurring in an STR or the creation of one itself, our current policy is to send out a letter. And we wait and see if we get a response. And interestingly, we have a very high response rate to that first letter, and in many cases get a correction. We've had people where we thought they were advertising occupancy in excess of what our occupancy limits allow, say that they will change their listing, and they won't say you can have 12 people here, you can only have 6, or whatever the numbers are. So there's reason to believe, and I think there's reason to believe that we get some response from that. If we don't hear anything at all, some number of days or weeks later, we will then send out a certified letter. And one recommendation that I would have is maybe in an effort to shorten the fairly lengthy time that it takes, given due process rights that property owners have, that maybe the first letter be a registered letter, which is a little harder for people to ignore. So that is a possibility. That's something that we can direct staff to think about or not. That would be more a change of policy than a change of actual ordinance or regulation. The third thing is, obviously, 22-15 was passed, 21 months ago. There have been a number of developments elsewhere in the state. There are at least 6 towns which now require some form of permitting, although that is not typically a general municipal permit. That is a permit which becomes embedded in their permitted uses and in their UDO or PDO. There may be more than that. It depends on what you want. And in some cases, they condition enforcement actions or the ability to require a permit on known violations at that property. In the case of Belmont, if there's been 4 violations in the past year, they can then require some form of permitting. So I think the recommendation from Barb and I there would be to ask staff to do a little bit of a survey to see how the world has changed since October of '22, and consistent with the guidelines that were laid out to the previous council who devised that ordinance, are there any changes that would be recommended as a result? In general, yes. Permitting would be one, would be perhaps the most obvious one. Inspections is something that has come up. There are, if I have another note here, there's a woman named Rebecca, I want to get her name, Badgett, at the UNC School of Government, who has developed a couple of presentations on this. And in the case of at least 2 towns, they require commercial insurance in the amount of $500,000. I'm not saying that's a good idea or a bad idea. I'm saying that the landscape has shifted for a variety of reasons, and are there recommendations staff might bring back to us for ways that would constitute, in some sense, changes to our existing code enforcement? So those would be the 3 specific recommendations there. We could sit here until midnight tonight and talk about other things, and I propose that we not do that. If, to the extent council wants to do that, we can schedule that as a separate item another time. But I think we should do that in the context of comment from staff as to what might be possible. That way we just don't waste time on things that are not possible or might be deemed ill-advised.
Barb, do you want to weigh in?
No, I'm going to thank you. I think he did a great job of summing that up.
With respect to all of, with respect to all of the other things, the recommendations are a little bit more granular, certainly very open to have discussion on any or all of them. And again, I wasn't trying to preempt it, just to say that that is a topic unto itself.
Shannon, do you have this form on digital so you can put it up on the screen? Okay. So basically, the STR is what you talked about before, and the other ones you're talking about are noise, nuisances, parking in the CBD, and then speeding.
Yes.
Okay. Any other specific recommendations that you two have for that?
I haven't discussed what the recommendations are. Those are the other topics.
I know, and I asked the question, do you have any specific recommendations on that? Are you going to talk about
Yes.
that later, or you want to talk about STRs first?
I can do it either way.
Okay. Can you summarize your recommendations again for the STRs?
One, to ask staff to bring us their recommendation for the best software package to permit tracking.
Okay.
2, change the current policy from sending just a stamp on an envelope to a registered letter in the first place when we have questions about whether there is a violation. We're not alleging that there is one, but we are seeking to engage the owner in a dialogue. Maybe they have documentation of pre-existing rental activity. We don't have that.
Okay. And then 3 is the staff does a survey.
And 3 is more for them to examine what else has gone on elsewhere in the state. You know, I think we all receive emails periodically from members of the public, and they'll say, well, Honolulu did the... That's interesting, but we understand where there's some fairly significant restrictions in North Carolina, and what they're doing in Honolulu may or may not have any validity in North Carolina. So just, have there been changes that could permit changes in our approach to enforcement? And if there are none, then they'll come back and tell us there are none.
Okay. I got a few questions here.
Sure.
Go ahead, you go first.
So first of all, ask the staff to identify the best software package. You gave an example of being able to identify new STRs that come on. I know that we've already been able to identify some of those that have come on. There's a cost-benefit aspect to this. The cost of the software package to do that, and the benefit we get out of it. So what are we going to do with all that information that we're not doing right now?
I would, as a general statement, not related to STRs, I think if there is a perception among some parts of the residents that we don't enforce the ordinance that we have.
Okay,
I think that's highly conditioned on how close they live to one and whether they have a negative, and we talked with Jeff Sanborn both privately and in this meeting, is it a squeaky wheel syndrome?
Okay.
How big is the problem? And I don't know the answer to that.
I just asked previously if we're going to talk about STRs, we're going to talk about all of them. You said we're talking about STRs first before we talk about them. And now you're saying in general, it's more than just STRs. This is in general the ordinances for looking at software. What is the software that we're asking them to look at? What do we... I go to the staff saying, I want you to look at software. What am I looking for? What am I asking them to solve?
In order for someone to be in violation of the ordinance, as I understand it, we would have to document that they have actually, and I've got the phrase here somewhere, that they have received income, if you will, that they've offered lodging in exchange for compensation for more than 14 days. How do we know when we get to that 15th day?
Okay. So you're asking for software to look at it for STRs?
Yes, and this exists. There are other municipalities that have used it, some in North Carolina, others not.
Okay, and that's what I've seen in some of the emails, but in all those discussions of software, I know of nothing in there that talks about noise, speeding, nuisances, or anything like that.
Correct.
Okay, so again, we were referring back to STRs for the software package. All right, so now I go back to a question I asked before. If we identify that there are people who are now operating STRs, okay, which we have already been able to do with that some, okay, and we have sent letters to them, what is the return on investment for this in the sense? How much more do you expect to identify on this that we're not already tracking?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know what their contribution to the county would be via the occupancy tax.
Okay. And I know you're saying ask, identify the best software. You're not saying purchase the best software. Okay, so it's actually looking at that. Because I think an analysis needs to be done also if you're going to look at the software. What is the problem we're actually solving, and to what degree is there a problem? Okay. You also described a narrative that there's a perception with folks that that's not being enforced. Okay, and you talked about a certified letter, which then suggests we are already sending letters, and then you also responded that we are getting a good response. What is a good response to regular letters? How much is a certified letter going to improve? So you remember the percentage of response we have?
Again, the perception that I am responding to is the amount of time it takes to enforce an existing ordinance of the Village of Pinehurst.
Okay, well, the actual answer on that is 82%. Okay, that's the
No.
response rate that we're getting from the letters that are going out on there.
We've gotten an 82% positive response rate, but that does not address those STRs that we suspect may be operating that began after the adoption of the ordinance.
And we don't know what we don't know, which I agree with you on that statement, which is going into that. My point, though, is that with the current ordinance we have, we are sending out letters right now. We've got a very good response rate from what you just stated here, and that's the information I'm getting also. And my question is to what degree is a software package going to be assisting us with that? And then you also said about staffing a survey to see how the world has changed and suggest general changes pertaining to the ordinance, okay? That's a pretty big request, basically seeing how the world has changed with this. I know we are following this both through the legal system, and we've all had meetings associated with that. We've also had interactions with our staff as they enforce this. And here's one of my problems, okay, and I brought this up into an email that I sent to all of you. I'm getting tired of the narrative that our staff is not enforcing the ordinance. We gave them the ordinance. They are enforcing it. They're sending the letters to them. But they're also responding to what we gave them. Now, if you want to open that ball, we can open that ball. I'm seeing them actually enforcing it to what we have. There's a limit to what they can do. So if we want to expect more from them, we better give them more to work with. And also, I made this very clear in the email I sent, we are the ones that are supposed to take the arrows, not the staff. So if we've given them something that's hard to work with, and they're getting shot, that's our fault.
All right. I don't know if we have to have a target range with arrows, Dr. Morgan.
I think you understand the point.
The staff is doing a good job, okay?
They are.
Okay. So
And
let me address something, though.
Jeff, Pat, if I could, I'm happy to take the arrow, but when I hear people, more than one or two, I think it's also incumbent on me to see, is there a solution? I will tell you that an email I received today suggests that 19 Pinewild, inside Pinewild, which was a U.S. Open rental, perfectly permissible, is continuing to advertise on VRBO.
Okay.
I don't live in Pinewild. I understand you have all voluntarily given up your right to rent based on the HOA, but that doesn't change the fact that I think if we have an ordinance and we can improve enforcement, which is what this whole section is about, we should try to do that within reason. And yes, there's cost benefit. There's no question about that.
All right, let me pick up where I was going to go. Since we passed that ordinance, over 2 years ago now, I guess, getting close, I think it's accomplished several things, which has made the community, the Village of Pinehurst, a lot better place to discuss this issue. One, the discussion level on that whole issue of STRs has declined, okay? It's quieted down, because why? Most people view it as working. There have been a total of 321 applications for non-conforming use certificate, okay? Our staff processed and awarded 277 non-conforming use certificates, okay, in the 1 year that the window was allowed. I think that's a remarkable accomplishment. There are still some remaining because some of the applicants have not provided enough information to staff so that they can decide about whether or not to issue a non-conforming use certificate. That is a system that is working, all right? I also believe that the amount of people who are out-of-town investors and were viewing the village of Pinehurst as a real estate amusement park for STRs has been eliminated, because you can't any longer purchase something that is not an STR and turn it into one, okay? I also believe that the investigation of the properties where there was a problem, I believe that the total was 49 individual properties, Alex, I thought that's what you said in the email. I think that's being done pretty well. It takes time. The issue of whether we send 1 or 2 letters, the first one certified or not, that's sort of a tactical decision. I have no problem whether we issue 1 or 2 letters. I've been in that sort of business, and I understand the purpose of a certified letter. And I do also realize that there are a handful of what I'll call problem childs out there, of homes or residences that I can almost recite the half a dozen addresses verbatim from people sending me emails about them. But they're not always in violation, okay, of our ordinances. Sometimes they are, and sometimes we take action. We, as a village, need to be vigilant and enforce the ordinance we have. I think we're doing a pretty darn good job. But if we can improve, I'm for improving. If there is some software package that we can utilize because the landscape out there has changed, we should pursue that. We should look into it and see where it might work if we can use it. Matter of fact, during the budget process, we made a point of making sure that there was some money aside to do that. So let's check that out. If it exists, maybe it's worthwhile. I'd like to see what staff says about that. I don't know from a cost-benefit analysis, but I think it is worthwhile to check out. I think we should do it just from a professional standpoint, and we should do it from the standpoint of our residents' interest. So what we have, I think, is an ordinance that's been working pretty well. The biggest request I've had from some folks is, could you please once again allow us, this is from STR owners, to apply for a non-conforming use certificate. We missed the window. And I'd like us to look at that as to provide an option. And I've heard that from, I'm going to say 10 to 12 people, okay? I don't know how they missed it. It was a year. It was open for a year, okay? I told some of them, go get your ordinance, but go get your NCUC. But that is something I would really like to look at. But we can consider that with all these other things. But I do think we've got an ordinance that is working, that can be probably improved upon a little, and we should look at any possible technological assistance that can be provided to our staff and to the village so that the job becomes easier, not more difficult. Okay.
Whenever you talk about making the job easier for the staff and having technological things, I totally agree with that. And that's not just for STRs, that's for anything. I want our police to have the right thing. I want the firefighters to have the right thing. I want the Parks and Rec to have the right thing. In this ask, because they're going to spend some time looking at it, I would also give the option of an answer of, we do not recommend a software package.
What? Say that again? That
we do not recommend a software package. So if they end up looking at it and they say, hey, I think we're doing enough on this, I recommend we not purchase any software package. That's
an option.
That's an acceptable answer. So I would ask that to be amended to your ask on there. Number 2, on the certified letter. If we need the certified letter, I got no problem sending one out. But what I'd recommend is just send out a letter first. If you're not getting the response, then send a certified letter next. You save
I
a
think
little
that's
bit
what we
of expense.
currently do. Am I correct?
That's what we do currently, yes.
I don't think there's a need to put everyone for a certified letter, especially when you have a good
I
response rate.
don't have a strong feeling.
On there, the third request, and their staff do a survey to see how the world has changed and suggest, I think we're already doing that, and I think we've had briefs in there, especially from the legal side. Okay? So if there's stuff that comes up on there that's significantly different, I got no problem getting briefed on
Well,
it.
I'd like,
think it's,
I would like to get a briefing on it, because all I've seen is news clips.
okay.
Okay? So I,
So basically, you want a presentation to the staff on how the world has changed
I'd
for
like them to
STRs.
check out how the world has changed, and then let us know, hey, the world really hasn't changed. These are just, these are rumors or whatever.
Is it-
Or
is this-
there's been a few changes.
Is this going to be an open meeting that Alex is providing for us, or is this going to be something that is closed with Mike Newman providing for us?
Oh, why wouldn't it be open? I don't know, I'm missing something.
I'm not even sure.
Well, a lawyer presenting stuff to us about legal recommendations for the.
No, I don't have a problem with an open meeting to discuss what's the rule of the road.
Just trying to fully understand what you're requesting there.
I'm good.
Okay?
Go ahead.
Okay, so it's a presentation we're asking for, and we're asking for software package on there, and then a certified letter if another letter is not responded to.
Yeah, the certified,
Okay.
yeah, the certified letter, I consider that very ministerial to decide whether or not you send one or two letters, but.
I've
we-
never seen a real estate amusement park. I just want to make sure we avoid it, so.
I'm glad. I've been
I
saving that
believe
real
that,
estate amusement park for years. Go ahead.
I believe that what John was getting at is that it is council's obligation, in a sense, to respond to the citizens and provide the staff with the resources necessary to do the job. I think that's kind of a basic thing. And I believe underneath the covers, what you're essentially saying is that you'd like to provide more resources, whether they be in the form of software packages or more people or whatever the resource is, to be able to do the job that we have asked them to do. I think that's what might be part of the message here.
Yes, one of the things that we stated in going into staff is if any of these areas require more in resources, whether that's human, technological, what have you, that they should let us know. The current procedure for the planning department to try to find out whether a particular property may be in violation of this is largely manual and time-consuming. So there's definitely, I think, if it could be automated, and they may come back and say it can't. And if that's their feeling, then I would absolutely respect that. They're going to be the experts, not me, certainly. And so it is in an effort to make that part of their job easier, because the sorts of things where I think they really have to spend time is when someone comes before HPC for a certificate of appropriateness, or someone wants to build and they have questions about our building codes and what have you. That's where I think they want to be spending the human time. That makes our government more responsive to either citizens or new people wanting to move here.
Jack, and I understand what you're saying there. John, I hear what you're saying on there. Pat, I heard what you said on there. I don't have a problem with providing the tools to the staff, making sure they have what they need. One of the reasons why I'm had quite a few comments on this is that my perception of this is there's an underlying tone that the staff is not enforcing the
I don't like that
ordinances.
tone either.
I don't like that.
Right, I understand that.
Okay, so we're backing up our staff. They're doing what they can. They're working with what we gave them. Okay, that's my point.
Or if we need to modify the ordinance to some extent or provide a window, if that's the right thing to do and staff agrees with that, well, then we ought to go down that road too.
Other comments?
Anything else on STRs?
No,
For the moment. I would only like to say this. I think that there is a perception out there. You're calling it a tone. I don't know whether it's a tone or a perception, but I do believe that if we have a means of communication that is factual, that is consistent, a tracking system would be a wonderful way for us to provide data and communicate data so that we don't have that underlying tone or misperception of what's really going on.
Or if I could paraphrase Jeff Sanborn, if we were allowed to outright require registration or permitting, a lot of these other issues would become far easier. We're not. We can't do that.
Can't do
So,
that.
we are where we are. That's not up to us to do.
I understand that. And so let's make sure we're not asking something we can't do. And Barbara, I hear what you're saying, okay? And I'll call it a tone, I'll call it a narrative, the feeling, however you want to look at that. I'll also ask everybody on the council, to include you, how much of that is our responsibility? How much of that is how we talk with our constituents? All right, because that has an effect. If we're approaching something in the sense we can't do this, or we're not enforcing this, then it makes more folks in the community start saying the same thing. And what we need to make sure we're saying is, yes, they're doing, that they are enforcing the code with what we gave them, okay? That needs to be the message we give to them.
Agreed.
All right, sounds like we reached a conclusion on that. Let's go on to the next topic.
Noise.
Easy, the deer is going to be the hard one here.
No, because fortunately, we have a subcommittee for that, so we're going to spend very little time on that, I think. I could be wrong.
What is happening on the deer?
Noise, and reminding people that the noise ordinance we have now is not specific to STRs. It applies to everybody. It's my backyard or my property and everybody else's. The current ordinance as written, although you have to read it very carefully, is a relative ordinance. It specifies two particular levels, decibel levels, but that is over and above the ambient level. And the ambient level differs based on where you are in Pinehurst and what time of day it is, and even what season it is or what the weather is. And in a separate conversation that I had with Chief Webb and Jeff Sanborn a while ago, I think it was their feeling that, well, the chief said it, at 1 o'clock in the morning, if he's called to a residence because there's an allegation that there's too much noise, he doesn't really want his guys holding the noise meter out the window and trying to do arithmetic as to, is it October, is it May, and what have you. So I think it was a sense of the chief in particular that if we move to an absolute standard rather than a relative standard, it would make it easier for them to enforce. Clearly, that's going to have to be at a different level than we have today. And trying to decide exactly, could we take an average of the ambient level all across Pinehurst? Well, that really could adversely impact people where the ambient noise level is higher. Maybe people who live closer to downtown or what have you. But again, this is a suggestion for a change from a relative to an absolute standard with staff to define exactly how to do that.
Well, what you're suggesting is that we ask staff to come back with recommendations as to how our ordinance should be changed and or new ordinances that are more effective and more applicable and or enforceable as far as noise
Easier
goes.
to enforce.
And that makes a lot of sense. I'm sure that other communities face exactly the same problem, and they may have come up with better solutions than we have.
Can I jump in on this one?
Sure.
So I do recall the conversations that you and I have had with Chief Webb about this very clearly. This is not a situation where Chief Webb or any of our law enforcement officers have come to us and described this as a problem. You asked Glenn Webb if it would be easier for his officers to take one measurement versus two. And the logical and only answer is yes, it's easier to take one measurement versus two. He didn't complain about having to take two. We're not trying to solve a problem for our officers. We're trying to solve a perception problem. This goes back to the perception issues. And in our most recent conversation that we had last week, I suggested to you, yes, sure, certainly we could change the ordinance and make it an absolute standard versus, the relative standard where we're taking into account the ambient noise. But what you'd have to do is add some level of ambient noise to the threshold that we use, and you just described that. I suggested to you that in order to keep ourselves out of legal difficulty, we would have to have kind of a worst case or something close to a worst case ambient noise. At the end of the day, the problem that we're trying to solve here is a perception problem, and it's driven by people who are dissatisfied with the result. They're dissatisfied that when our officers came out and took the 2 measurements, somebody wasn't cited. That won't change if we go to this, if we just change the methodology and add ambient noise onto the way we're measuring it.
I agree with that. And I hope that I did not imply that this was coming from the police force or saying that they felt there was a need for a change, because I did not mean to imply that if I did. I think I'd like to take that up in a sidebar, because I don't fundamentally disagree, Jeff, with what you've just said. I think there is a way perhaps to change both the result and the perception. And that's, I think, what I would like to see us do.
Only if we're, in some way, we're lowering the threshold, if you know what I'm saying?
No, the goal is not to create more noise complaints by lowering the standard so that more people think that their next-door neighbor's in violation. And again, this is not an STR-related thing. Yes, certainly some portion of the complaints come from STRs, but not all of them. Okay. Nuisances. Deer, we have a voluntary subcommittee of Barb and Jeff Morgan who are going to look into this, which I'm delighted. So I said in the meeting with staff, I think I know the direction this probably has to go, because I don't think we can expect the deer to voluntarily go other places, but I will defer to the subcommittee who will come back to us at some point. Residential lighting, and I admit that probably the number of cases where this occurs is not that high. There were some changes that were made, I believe, a year ago to our existing ordinances, and there have been some specific cases where that is not working, and so the request to staff is there a way to further tinker with what we already have to improve the net result in the relatively small number of cases where it is a problem? And we have a couple where there are very bright lights shining into people's property. That was not the intention of the ordinance as currently written.
Who is expected to enforce the lighting ordinances?
The way the ordinance is written, our police officers are required to document the violation photographically and then hand it over to our code enforcement officer for enforcement.
Is that optimum?
Well, who else is on duty at that time of the day?
Exactly.
I think it is, given that Alex doesn't want to go out at 10 o'clock at night, so.
Yeah.
I don't believe we get many violations.
We don't, yeah.
No, we don't.
And we talked about one example in our meeting last week, and Alex and I went back and looked at the ordinance language, and it seemed to me that what was being described is already covered by the ordinance language, but I don't know if you were able to get any more feedback on that, Alex. Yeah.
I'm happy to have either a sidebar on that with email to look at it or a discussion on it. I also saw complaints from that came through, I think it was email on there I saw that was forwarded to me at one time, individual who had different religious faith, and it didn't coincide with the standard Judeo-Christian things, and so their celebration lights and stuff like that, it's a holiday lights and in there. So it's less than perfect in some ways. I've got no problem discussing it again. I'm certainly not at a point of changing it now.
I think very crudely what we're attempting to prevent is someone's house illuminating your yard in a way that is detrimental to you.
I understand, and I've got no problem discussing that again. So,
property maintenance, we didn't really think there was much of an issue there. Garbage cans, I believe, statistically is the #1 complaint that is filed on my VOP. And it mostly is around, they put them out too early or they don't pick them up in time.
Oh, my God.
I think that captures a lot of it.
Well, we get 14,000 hits on solid waste on our website. How can that, you can't beat that off.
And again, I think it is clearly something that is on the minds of a very broad range of citizens. I think a lot of it tends to be the same complaint. And in some sense, I think the question back from staff is, do you really want us to enforce this more strictly? And I think that's where we may all have to come up with, the regulations are pretty clear. Clearly, I suppose if I'm a property management company managing an STR that is otherwise perfectly legal and pickup day is Wednesday, but I send the cleaning crew out Sunday night and they put the garbage cans out there and they sit there Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I don't know. That's one example. There certainly have been others of just neighbors or people going out of town and they put them out early. So,
Well, what's the percentage of garbage can violations for STRs versus non-STRs?
We don't know because we don't know where all the STRs
we don't know where all the STRs are. Impossible to answer.
Has nothing, it's not STR related.
No.
So the software is going to solve that for us, huh?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let us know where it is.
There's your cost-benefit analysis.
Okay. All right.
Parking in the central business district. It's actually interesting, because I was in the central business district this morning for breakfast and saw 3 of the delivery trucks and spoke with one of the restaurant owners who knows exactly the schedule on which they come, and I even talked to one of the drivers for whom this is a normal route. One thing I learned, which I didn't know, was that the trucks are actually able to access some of the restaurants in non-business hours. So if they come in here at 5:30 in the morning, which a lot of them like to do, they don't want to be here at 11 o'clock or at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, they can actually make a delivery into the restaurant, lock the door, and go. I don't think that is a particular problem. And I think it was the sense of our conversation with staff that at 8:30 in the morning, there's not so much traffic on Chinkopin that you can't get around the Cisco food truck or the U.S. Foods truck. Commercial vehicles, by that I meant often trucks that will take up more than one parking space because they either are very oversized or they have a trailer on them, something like that. And I think it was the general feeling that, again, if they're not there, if they're there and gone by 9 or 9:30 in the morning, some reasonable period of time, that's probably not a problem, but they probably ought not be able to take up 2 or 3 parking spaces at 11:30 in the morning. And I don't recall, because I don't have my notes in front of me from that, whether that requires further ordinance or change to an ordinance in the way we enforce that.
They should be already be in violation of the double parking.
They're not double parked, they're parked in the parking space, but taking up 2 spaces.
That's double parked. That meets the
That
definition.
in New York City is parking in the travel lane, but that's the definition of
Double
double park?
parked is occupying more than one parking space.
Okay. And that then leaves oversize, and I would emphasize that oversize seems to be primarily a problem on Market Street, not on Chinkopin. And it tends to be the very large pickup trucks, sometimes with tractor trailers, and if you get one of them parked in the angle parking and another one parked in the parallel parking on the other side, it's probably still okay for a passenger car to get through, but the UPS delivery or what have you may have some issues. And that, again, I think we were just looking, I don't know that there's a need for a change in any language. The question is, do we just want it more stringently enforced?
What would that involve to more stringently enforce it?
My opinion, putting a ticket on when the squad car rolls through, as periodically they do, being observant to this and ticketing people, because the other complaint is that when the large trucks pull up too far and they block in order to avoid that, they block the sidewalk.
Yeah, all those types of situations are necessarily a judgment call on the part of the officer that's responding, and they have to make the assessment of whether or not a vehicle is impeding traffic.
Right.
And different people will come up with different interpretations of whether or not a vehicle is impeding traffic. I think that I mean, we had this conversation last week as well. We might have opportunities to change the location in some cases of where golf cart parking is and try to put that in those places that are tighter, where we're having some of this problem that you're describing.
Or it may come up in the next concept, which is time limits. And maybe we should bundle that together. We imposed the 3-hour parking limit during the US Open. I think, Doug, you said there were 49 or 50 citations actually handed out. It's actually not a terrible number. The perception of merchants that I spoke with is that this is not so much an employee parking issue, although that is sometimes the case, but that extending the 3-hour time limit that we had in place just for the US Open to all the time would help the turnover of vehicles there. And according to the chief, there is technology, license plate recognition technology to make this fairly administratively simple, where at a minimum from a cost basis standpoint, Jeff Morgan, we might at least recoup the cost of any technology that we had. We're not doing it to enhance the P&L here.
And we would probably have to add staff.
Would have to be advertised heavily, though, within that zone, right?
Yeah, it'd all have to be marked with signs, so we're talking about more downtown
More
signs.
signs, yeah.
We'd have to mark it with signs?
Yeah. At a minimum, it would have to be within sight of every parking spot. You'd be able to have to be, it says from here to here, 3-hour parking. So yeah, it has to be. If you can envision what you've seen in other towns and other places, but
I actually was in downtown Sanford today. They have discs, they're about 8 inches wide, embedded in every parking space, and those can be used both to advertise available parking, which is interesting, and to monitor overtime parking as well. They're IoT devices.
And I know we talked about this a couple years ago, and I know there's a cost to it. I'm willing to revisit this. I'd like to listen to it again, because I do think that there needs to be some mechanism of timed parking downtown.
If we can't increase the number of spaces, it would be advantageous to increase the turnover or minimize those who don't turn over, so.
I don't see us growing parking spaces.
We have 5 on the horizon.
And finally, speeding, we talked about this in the context of the 4-way intersection at Magnolia and Chinkopin. I think Jeff Sanborn basically said, sure, there's some places where we can just go examine other places to take a look at speeding on an episodic basis. We don't want to go back to people getting tickets doing 27 and a 25. I'm quite content that our officers do a great job exercising discretion. You just read the police report and you see how many stops there are versus how many actual citations are written versus verbal or written warnings. I think we're probably in good shape there, but there are certain places where a little better enforcement is probably a good thing.
Okay. Let me go back to the parking. The part that interests me the most is, what is the cost to the parker who is in violation? What is the price on that ticket that goes on the windshield? Now, somebody here, I think it's $5. Is that what our parking ticket is?
depends on the violation. They think they range from $5 to $50 now.
Oh, we have a $50
Time
ticket?
parking.
And 50 is the max per state general statute?
Okay. So what did we say during the open? Don't park here and you get $50? Okay. Why would we
It was
not-
only 50 for the time parking, though.
Okay.
We didn't put up signs during the US Open about 3-hour parking, did we?
Yes. In lieu of the US Open, what was our price on a ticket? $5.
My daughter got one for $20
I just,
Oh, why did we pick on Jeff's daughter?
not all,
back in June last year.
yeah. Double
She had a
parking's
big
10,
truck.
yeah.
She had a big truck?
Yeah, she paid 20. And I donated 20 to the police fund for giving her a ticket.
That's good.
Hey, good job.
That's good, Dad.
Are you
Well,
establishing a matching fund for that?
I'd like,
Just happy they wrote the ticket.
I would like us to seriously look at this idea of what we price a parking ticket at. I think $5 is laughable. We're not serious. The people who get the tickets won't think we're serious. We need to be a little more serious. So
I agree with that. I think-
please look at it, okay?
Yeah, there needs to be a significant increase in what we're charging for parking.
Yeah, there's got to be cost benefit. Well, $5 is it's nothing. Okay, that is my big interest in the parking world.
At this point, I would like to resign from the Code Enforcement Subcommittee. This has really been fun.
Okay. And I'd like to see if Dr. Morgan will pay my next ticket. Okay.
No, you're not my daughter. So I paid hers.
All right, do we have any other issues to cover on this code enforcement topic? Any comments, any thoughts? We have some, I guess there'll be some follow-up based on the comments that were made. And as in due time, let's come back and look at them. And it's probably something we should probably look at, if we can, in September, but it's also something that should be on the November, December retreat topic. Okay. Okay. Other business? Hearing none? None? Okay. Our next meeting in August, our only one until we meet in September. So we've got to think in terms of anything in particular for the agenda. I think from earlier, Doug, what we heard from Jason is we might see something at the next meeting? Oh, he said end of August? Okay. Well, then that's it. If he has something earlier, that'd be great.
Maybe some drawings in advance, but
Okay.
nothing formal.
Yeah.
I'll forward anything before the next meeting to you.
Okay, fair enough. And we will, I mentioned taking up a resolution on the Pinehurst Traffic Circle. Is there anything else people want to be sure we tackle before the end of August at our meeting?
Don't we technically have a special meeting on the 2nd?
That's different topic.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything? No. Okay. Hearing no other business, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to adjourn the work session.
Second. Aye.
I was adopted. Okay. Now I guess, do we have to go back in? No, we don't have to go back into the regular session, do we?
Wasn't a close session.
Okay.
You're free.
Good night and good luck.